Why do economists often have different opinions? It's not because they're just guessing. It's because they think systematically, using the scientific method just like physicists or doctors. But the way they build models and analyze the world is unique. Today, we're going to dive into how economists think. What is their mental framework? And why do they see the world so differently from the average person? The journey begins with observation. Economists look at the real world. For example, why do gasoline prices fluctuate? They're never fixed. Sometimes they're low, other times they're high. Economists observe further. When do prices go up? When do they go down? What do these changes coincide with? An oil embargo, a production cut in Saudi Arabia, a weather disaster. From these observations, a theory develops. Gasoline prices are likely influenced by global supply and demand. When supply drops or demand rises, the price goes up. To test this, economists collect data from the last 20 years, correlating prices with supply and demand quantities and seasonal factors. Does the theory match the data? Yes, it does. The supply and demand framework can predict about 80% of the price variations. The theory is valid, but it's not 100%. There's still 20% that isn't explained. Are there other factors? So, the theory is revised to include speculative trading, currency fluctuations, and political disruptions. Now the model is more accurate. This is science, a continuous cycle of observing, theorizing, testing, and revising, all to build the most accurate model possible. Economists wear assumption sunglasses. This means they filter out irrelevant details to focus on the key mechanisms. For example, in a short-term analysis of 6 months, they might assume that prices are fixed and nominal wages don't adjust immediately. Why? Because of fixed contracts and menu costs, the cost of updating prices. The focus is on how quantity demanded reacts to a demand shock. With this assumption, the model is simple. The prediction: if demand goes up, quantity goes up, but the price stays the same. Now, for a long-term analysis of 3 to 5 years, the assumption changes. Prices are flexible. Wages adjust, the market reaches a new equilibrium. The focus is now on how prices and quantities adjust in the long run. The model is different, and so is the prediction. If demand goes up, both price and quantity rise to a new equilibrium. Think of it like Galileo's analysis of a falling ball. He assumed no air resistance. This made the model simple and useful for understanding the mechanics of falling. In reality, a ball falling in water faces huge resistance, making the model complicated. Economists do the same. Assumptions don't have to be 100% realistic, but they must be realistic enough to answer the question at hand, while being simple enough to analyze. Let's look at first model, the circular flow diagram. This is the basic heartbeat of the economy. There are two main actors: households like you and me, and firms, which are businesses. They interact in two markets. First, the markets for goods and services. Here, households are the buyers use shopping at a mall or eating out. Firms are the sellers, the store, the restaurant, the workshop. When you pay for your meal, that money becomes revenue for the restaurant. The second interaction is in the markets for factors of production. Here, the roles are reversed. Households are the sellers, supplying labor, land, and capital. Firms are the buyers, demanding workers, land, and capital to produce goods. When you work for a month and get paid, that salary is income for your household and a cost for the firm. The inner loop of this diagram shows the flow of goods and services, while the outer loop shows the corresponding flow of money. Your money goes from your wallet to a shop, which uses it to pay employees, who then spend it at a supermarket, and the cycle continues forever. This is a simplified model. Of course, reality is more complex, with governments, international trade, and financial markets. But the fundamental mechanism is the same. Our second model is the Production Possibilities Frontier, or PPF. It answers the question, with fixed resources, what can we produce? We assume there are only two goods, say rice and electronics, and that technology and resources are fixed. Imagine a country can produce either 100 million tons of rice or 10 million electronic units. Or it could produce a combination, like 50 million tons of rice and 5 million electronics. The PPF curve connects all these feasible options. Its shape is bowed outward from the origin. Why? Because of increasing opportunity cost. Initially, to produce 1 unit of electronics, you only need to shift a few resources away from rice production. The opportunity cost is low. But as you produce more and more electronics, you have to shift a lot of resources, and the opportunity cost becomes high. This is because some resources are better suited for growing rice. There are 3 types of production points. On the PPF curve, production is efficient, no waste. Inside the curve, it's inefficient. There are unemployed resources. Outside the curve is infeasible with current resources. When the PPF shifts outward, it signifies economic growth. This happens through new technology or more resources, allowing us to produce more of everything. This is why economies grow. The PPF is constantly shifting out. Now, let's talk about the 2 main branches of economics. Microeconomics zooms in on the individual level. It asks questions like, what's the price of a phone in this city? Why? How many people want to work as delivery drivers? The main tool is supply and demand for specific markets. It helps predict that if a company pays its drivers more drivers will be willing to work longer hours. Macroeconomics zooms out to the economy-wide level. It asks, what is the country's GDP growth this year? What is the unemployment rate? What is the inflation rate? The tools are aggregate models that predict, for example, how a government stimulus will affect GDP and inflation. The 2 are connected. Macroeconomic changes arise from the aggregation of millions of micro-level decisions. If all individuals decide to save more, the national savings rate goes up. If all firms decide to hire more people, total employment rises and unemployment falls. This brings us to a crucial distinction: positive versus normative statements. A positive statement is a factual claim that can be tested with data. For example, if the minimum wage increases by a certain amount, unemployment will rise by 2%. We can test this by looking at historical data. If the data is clear, economists will generally agree. A normative statement, on the other hand, is a value statement. It cannot be tested with data. For example, the government should raise the minimum wage for social justice. This depends on your priorities. Is it justice, efficiency, growth? One person might say justice is the top priority, so raising the wage is a moral must. Another might say efficiency is key, and rising unemployment is a worse outcome. Who is right? It depends on your values. There is no scientific answer. So, why do economists so often disagree? There are 3 main reasons. First, scientific disagreement. Even positive claims can be hard to test if data is ambiguous or incomplete. Different economists might use different data, time periods, or methodologies, leading to different results. Second, different values. Even if they agree on the facts, for example, that a minimum wage increase will raise unemployment, their normative views can differ. An egalitarian economist might say it's still worth it to reduce inequality, while a libertarian economist might argue it's not worth it because it infringes on individual freedom. Third, perception and framing. Sometimes, disagreement isn't about economics, but about politics or how an issue is framed. One economist might frame imports as bad for local producers, while another frames them as good for consumers. Both facts can be true, but the different focus leads to different conclusions. So, when you hear an economic claim, ask yourself, is this a positive or normative statement? If it's positive, is the data reliable? If it's normative, what are the underlying values, and do you agree with them? Be wary of media framing, which often highlights only one side of a policy. Listen to multiple perspectives. People with different values and backgrounds can offer valid insights you might miss. Economic models aren't perfect, but they are powerful tools for thinking clearly about the world. They help us understand how the economy coordinates, what's possible with our resources, and how individual decisions lead to aggregate outcomes. Now you know how to think more like an economist. Go out and make smart choices. Thanks for watching.